Good evening, everybody. Huge Pop Wrestling fans. This is your host, Huge Pop. Tonight, I have the current reigning CWF Christian Wrestling Federation heavyweight champion from Texas. He calls himself the most accomplished CWF heavyweight champion in history. It is Mr. Ryan Hart. Welcome to the show, Ryan. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Glad to be here and glad to represent the Christian Wrestling Federation all the way from the Rockwall area of Texas, which is Dallas-Fort Worth Metro.
Nice. So I'm going to start out asking you this question. You got that belt that you talked about. You call yourself the most accomplished CWF champion in history. Talk to me about June 17th and that accomplishment, and how did that feel that day?
So there's been a back and forth battle between Johnny Lawless and I for really quite some time, but it kind of got put on pause for a little bit right after we came back from the pandemic and we started our shows back up. And he went after the belt against our current champion at that time, Barrett Brown. And, finally it kind of came up where after they told their story, I got my turn, And so this past December, at our cage match show, I went one-on-one with Johnny Lawless and was able to be victorious. And as I said before in the promo, I'm not the biggest or the baddest, but I've been around long enough. I can outsmart plenty of guys. And so I outsmarted him then, won the belt. And then pretty much since then, it's been between me and Johnny Lawless and another one of our wrestlers, Aaron Eagle. We've traded the belt back and forth a few times. And so it finally built up after we had a triple threat match in May between the three of us at our anniversary show, where Johnny Lawless had won the belt back. And so then we had to kick the stakes up even higher. And so when we started that show in June, I had a plan in mind from the very beginning. And so I put out there, I said, you know what, you're a pretty tough wrestler. You take on everybody. I don't take anything away from you. So I'd imagine you don't quit, right? There's no quitting you, Johnny Lawless. And so I proposed we had an I Quit match. He didn't want my tag team partner, the Guardian, to be at ringside because he knows what we're about. And, I'd be lying if I said that wasn't a part of my plan. But I still had more pieces to that plan. And so he could take away the Guardian, and that's fine. Jesus Freak, Rob Vaughn, stepped in and he added one more before we spent all night long going back and forth and said, you guys are done doing this. Whoever wins tonight, you don't get to challenge the other for the belt ever again. So that's what it all boiled down to. And all the while, all I had to do was be tough enough to last to see my plan out. And my plan worked perfectly. And all that it came down to was I was begging and pleading for my life in that moment. I will say anything you want me to say, Johnny. What do you want me to say so I can end it now? And he uttered the words, I quit. The bell rang, and I am once again the CWF champion.
There you go. You're smart, man. So I'll give you that credit. I'm not going to say nothing about Johnny Lawless because I don't know what he'll say. But so, when did you find yourself loving the sport of professional wrestling?
So, back when around '93, I was in middle school. I think 6th, 7th grade, and I can't remember what had happened, but I missed out on something. I was gone, and I found out that my sister got to watch a wrestling VHS pay-per-view that my dad had rented. And so when I found out I missed out on it, he rented it again. I got to watch it, and pretty much from then is where it started me becoming a fan. But it didn't take long. I want to say 6 months because I was all in. I was getting action figures. I was subscribing to the magazine. I was all about the World Wrestling Federation, and we went back and rented and watched everything in succession that was on the shelf at Blockbuster, and I got all caught up. And before the end of that year, we ordered our first pay-per-view. But like I said, within 6 months was where it wasn't enough. I had everything memorized. I was memorizing the entrances, where they're from and their weight. But then it's just like reading interviews in that magazine. I was like, I wanted to know more. I wanted to know what was behind it. And so that's where that spark started, that of a dream of becoming a professional wrestler. And I remember there being an interview with Shawn Michaels in one of the magazines, and he was talking about how, fighting with his parents about having to go to college. And so I kind of felt the same way. Not that I was that age yet, but I thought, man, I don't like school. I don't know what I want to go to school for. I don't want to go to school. And that continued even until I graduated. And I only continue to go to school. Like I went and got an associate's degree because I knew that was the smart thing to do, right? Have at least something to fall back on, something to pay the bills. But as he said in that interview, like it hit him like a ton of bricks. That's what he wanted to do. And so I just had this weird thought at that age, around 12, 13, that, maybe there's a reason I haven't broken a bone in my body, and that's to be a professional wrestler.
Nice. Well, we got two people in the chat, and I'm going to hold off on your guys' questions, but I will get to them. Okay, Justin and Mr. Robinson, but I'm going to go a little bit further. What are some of the wrestlers you enjoyed watching growing up?
So, in that time was kind of pre-Attitude Era, but then I became a teenager during the Attitude Era. So, in the beginning, it was going back and watching those old tapes was Macho Man Randy Savage. I was into Hulk Hogan a little bit, but it was just kind of, the early stages of, just who was larger than life and who really connected with the crowd and things like that. As I moved into the Attitude Era and still didn't necessarily follow or got into like cheering for the heels kind of thing. I was still, big babyface follower. So Rock and Stone Cold. But of course, all-time favorite has to be Shawn Michaels, and then very close second, Chris Jericho.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So do you model your style after any of those guys you just mentioned?
I do a little. I can't remember now what it was or where I came across. It was early on in my training and early on in my career where I came across something I think Dustin Rhodes had said. And, he was talking about how he's just got kind of a small move set, but he does those moves really well. And he doesn't get real big and flashy. He doesn't have a big, long list of moves. And so that just resonated with me and because I'm not real flashy. I'm not a high flyer. And so I kind of more stick to the ground and stick to, basics. And so I just kind of ran with that. But at the same time, I didn't ever want to fully emulate or copy anybody else that I saw. And so I would, whether it was moves, I tried to limit myself to one move here, one move here, one move there, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels. So, and then as far as look and attitude and things like that, like initially when I first started, kind of the concept of who Ryan Hart was going to be, it was kind of centered around, Sting, Bret Hart, and Shawn Michaels. And Shawn was just kind of more the look because, as a kid, I don't know why, I just never thought of myself as being a heel, being a villain. And so that never really crossed my mind until I was kind of thrown into some of those predicaments early on. And so that's like the whole, wholesome and there to watch somebody's back from Sting and just being a good ground wrestler and a good guy and a good role model with Bret. And then just kind of really it was the looks with Shawn. But as I've, spent more time working heel and working that other side, then it's, it's picking out, kind of how Shawn Michaels did it and Jericho, because they're smaller guys, because I'm usually in the ring with guys that are my size or bigger. So I have to use some psychology from what they do as far as, how to work matches and how to put on a good show. That's believable for sure. With me being smaller and a big guy.
Nice. Yeah. So where did you go for training? What kind of wrestling school, if there was any, or did you do your own training in your own home, or?
Didn't ever do any in my own home, and wasn't at all like drawn to, because the backyard wrestling scene started kind of building a little bit around my, when I got graduated and could have started. But I was not drawn to that at all. I just felt like that wasn't the right way to do it. And that was a way to, not that I'm trying to dog on any of them, but it was like, if I was going to do it, I was going to do it right. I'm going to see it through and see if I even had what it took to do it. And so I remember, I was really enthralled with Tough Enough when it first came out on MTV and how Al Snow trained. And I was just like, by the time they got ready to, they were announcing they were going to do a third season. I was like, all right, I'm going to put in, I'm going to do an audition tape for it. And didn't of course hear anything back because I know they got so many of them and I wasn't at all in a place where I looked like I would have been a prospect. But then after that, I kept after it. And so I looked up, wrestling schools. And so I found Shawn I think he was on his way out, but running the one he had in San Antonio. And I was like, sent a letter asking for information. I didn't know if Al Snow still had his running or not. And I found an address for that, sent to there. And then I sent to Ohio Valley Wrestling, knowing that at that time, it was a developmental. And so my thought was, if I turn out to really pick this up fast and things move in the right direction, then if I'm able to make that move and afford that training, then why not go there? And on the beginner level, the way they had that set up at the time, I don't know what they've got now, but it was the most affordable, even though that meant me relocating from Amarillo, Texas to the Louisville, Kentucky area. And that's actually where I got started in 2005, January that year, doing the beginners level training. And I found out I could physically hang, I could physically do it, but that also it's a whole different world to actually get, move up in levels and where you're on their roster and things like that. And of course, getting noticed and of course, I think when I actually started was they also had Florida, they were starting that one. And then shortly after I left, because I was only there about a year and a half, then they fully transitioned to everything being in Florida. But, I could tell and see that, okay, I'm having a hard time putting in all the other work that it takes to progress and to be that level, and also ran into a little bit of burnout. It was like, I don't know if this is for me. And I think some of it honestly was just being that far away from family, not necessarily homesick, but I couldn't see my family as often when I was used to, we doing birthdays and family get-togethers and things like that. And so sorting through a lot of that was okay, I'm gonna come back closer to home, and I need to see if this is still something I want to pursue or not, because I don't want to give up too early.
Right. Wow. That's crazy. So that physical work wasn't hard, but it was just the other stuff, grasp a hold of that stuff that's where the hard work came in then.
Yeah, the harder part was more the physical training outside of wrestling. Now wrestling itself and learning that, and I tell guys all the time when I first meet them or they're first training with us here at CWF that, everybody learns at a different pace, just like anything else in life. And so there's going to be some guys who pick it up really fast, and there's some guys that takes a little bit longer. It took me a little bit longer. Like I kind of stayed in that beginner's level longer than I probably should have, but also felt like I spent extra time on those basics and where, I got a good solid foundation before I moved on to more.
Awesome, man. So I got one more question, then I'm going to get to the chat questions. Okay. I got a whole bunch more questions, but that's going to lead into it. So how important, in your opinion, are fan interactions during the matches and then at the merch table after the event?
They're huge. I mean, that is what, currently right now I'm in, I wouldn't say another burnout kind of season, but I'm in a season where the wrestling itself, like I love some of the guys I get opportunities to work with, especially if they're guys I don't regularly work with that are, on our full-time roster. When we have some other guys that come in special and things like that, that's exciting, but I'm more excited about the reaction I get out of the crowd now. Like that's what I'm more focused on, is the psychology and being able to get a reaction out of them. And if they're not, if they're not booing me enough, get them to boo even more. What can I do that really gets me under their skin, and so that I find more exciting right now. It's just kind of the season I'm in, is that fan interaction. If I could just go out there and manage, then I would, but my body can still do it. And so I'm still going to do it as long as I can, but that's actually what's more exciting to me right now. And we have the way our show's set up, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but even though I don't sit at a merch table and do that kind of traditional thing that you see at shows, we sit around the ring afterwards and sign autographs and take pictures and talk to people. And that's huge for what we do, right? We're a wrestling promotion, but we go further because we're also a ministry, and we're trying to reach people where they're at, in their souls and for their eternity. And so when we can continually make a connection with that fan base that keeps coming back, even if they're not traditional wrestling fans, they're fans of us and they're fans of what we do. Then if there's something that's not right in their lives, whether it's just getting to pray with them for them, or whether it's something that they want to make a decision for Christ, that's huge for what we do specifically, because we've got to be real and genuine and make those connections and keep them up.
Absolutely, 100%. So I have Justin in the chat. He wants to know what is one of your dream opponents, a dream match that you'd have?
Because since I haven't, and I know we hadn't touched on this yet, but I've really specifically just wrestled for CWF. I haven't, I didn't get to that upper tier. I didn't get, developmental contract or anything like that. And so like that's a huge long list, honestly, but I think that the top dream would be either HBK or Jericho, just because they're my favorite of all time, and to be able to share the ring with them would just be, that's the dream come true, I think, for me.
Awesome. So now I got another guy in here. He's from a promotion I cover also, MCW. out of Illinois right now, and his thing is, "I want a shot at that belt." So
Well, you're going to need to talk to our man in charge, the Jesus Freak. But I'm sure if we could work something out, then we can work something out. You can get a shot. But just
there you
know
go.
I'm pretty smart.
There you go. Who have you been? Who has been some of the most inspirational people in your wrestling career and in your non-wrestling life?
Okay. I'll start with wrestling. I mean, again, that's still kind of an easy answer, I guess, but because of the transformation that Shawn Michaels made. When you first start watching wrestling, you're a fan and you're younger, like I said, I wanted to know more, and I liked reading the interviews, and I liked knowing about who the men were behind the performers and what they did in the ring and what you saw on TV. But like, it's a whole other level to find out later, and especially as you start working, but that, you know, Sean was a totally different person during his first run, like with, and not just the fact that he's not Christian, but man, he was, to hear everybody talk about how hard it was to work with him and the attitude that he had and things like that. But then to know that it was night and day difference to see, even just on screen, when you're watching matches and stuff, the transformation that happened in his life, you could tell, even though he wasn't out there, like he wasn't necessarily given a mic to preach or anything like that, but he was still doing what he did best and had just as good, if not better, of a run the second time around after retirement. But after becoming a Christian, that just came out, that came through that screen, even just doing what he's always done. And so to me, not only as a wrestler, just the wrestling standpoint of, like I said, that journey that he had, but to also in his faith, like where he didn't know Christ before and then he did,
Right.
and just to know how people talk differently about him from locker room experiences, and like I said, how you could tell just from watching his work and his attitude that it was just night and day difference. So that's certainly a big influence as far as the wrestling world goes. And I think in general, outside of that, I know, I always looked up to my mom, even though there's some distance right now between us, but she was always a big one that I looked up to, and her faith and the things that she had to do. We ran into a point where I was 16, my sister was 13. That's when my parents got divorced, and she had to go back to school, not back to school, but back to get her nurse's license reinstated, and had to go back to work at the hospital 12-hour shifts when, she'd spent the last, 15, 16 years being a stay-at-home mom. And so to just totally make that shift and have to totally do whatever it took to provide for her and her family. And then another one would be my youth pastor, from the tail end of when I was in youth, and then I also worked for him as a youth intern, where I got to learn about being a youth minister and all. But we don't talk quite as much anymore. He's currently a missionary, and but for the most part, every few years when he's kind of back here on furlough, I usually get a chance to catch up a little bit with him and his family. But he's been another one who's been a big influence in my life, leading up until. Especially for, like, as I got started in the wrestling career, but then even still to this day.
Okay, awesome. So the next question is like a two-parter. What is your experiences like working in front of various crowds? I mean, the pandemic, regular wrestling events, to even your school assemblies and the church events that you do. Is there a big difference in there? Or do you just go out and do the same thing every time?
For the most part, it's all kind of geared the same. Doing our monthly shows here is, and as I said, it's definitely more of a promotion, but it's also ministry, and so that's got more of the promotion feel. And we're running storylines, and we're doing an ongoing thing. We want people to come back every month, and we're in the same place every month, and so that's going to be done a little differently than what we do, when we travel, when we go outside, whether it's a church or it's a camp. We got the opportunity to go do a summer camp, which, from what I'm told, it was before I got here. But when CWF first started, that's all they did for like the first summer, was just summer camp after summer camp after summer camp. But like, we got to go spend a little bit of time with those young men. It was I think elementary age boys, and it was out in Louisiana. So we spent some time with them, like the day before we had the show. So we're just kind of hanging out there. We saw them at the pool. We're seeing them at the cafeteria and just trying to kind of make some connections. And then, of course, we had to make a creative shift into setting up the show. And so we had an opportunity where a fight broke out, and there in the dinner time that happened right before our show. And so we could clearly set up who they wanted to cheer for and who they were gonna hate. going into that show. And so there's opportunities like that present itself where we get to be a little bit more creative and kind of set that up. For the most part, when we travel, we kind of have a formula that we follow that just keeps it real simple, because as unique as our ministry is, like, it was geared and built for wrestling fans, right?
Right.
It is an opportunity where people who won't go into a church for whatever reason, they don't feel comfortable, whether it's the clothes they wear, whether it's enough, not enough money, whether it's the things they've experienced in their life, or the sin that they're coming in with, for whatever reason, they're not going to feel comfortable walking into a random church on a Sunday morning and feeling judged and stuff. But Saturday night, they'll go to a wrestling show, right? So I think the original uniqueness of it is geared to fit wrestling fans, but it is very seldom that we're actually in front of wrestling fans. Like, we have to start from ground zero and teaching them what a wrestling show is about. And so sometimes it's rough the first, depending on, especially if it's a smaller crowd, but the first match or two, it takes a little bit trying to really get them engaged and involved and understand. You cheer for the good guys, you boo the bad guys, and here's what's going on. And so we've kind of got a formula on a lot of those travel shows where we keep it real simple, good versus evil, and set that up for them so that they can catch on as quickly as possible. And then the main point is, of course, by the time we get to the main event, where they are all in, they're all about it, from every age demographic and whatever, they're super excited. And then we know, okay, we've got a captive audience. So what's most important after the show's over, like right after that main event, is where we share the gospel. And that's what's most important to us. And so we build everything to be as effective as possible and the best caliber as possible, so that we gain that audience for what's most important there at the very end.
Absolutely. That reminds me of us. Like I said before we went on, that I was a youth pastor up in Michigan, and we put on it was a lock-in, so to speak, and I had a DJ. I had a DJ system, and I had music. I thought, I loaded it up with a bunch of Christian music, all art, rap, rock, whatever. I was playing it, and nobody was in it. No one was doing anything. They were just sitting at tables, and my pastor comes up to me and says, "You have to get to where they're at first before they're ever going to be where you want, where you'd like to see them." And I'm like, okay, cool. So I started playing the secular music a little bit, and they got more into it. And you tossed a little bit of the Christian music in, and they got more into it. And by the end of the time, at the end of the whole dance party or whatever it was, right before the message was in the sanctuary at like midnight, they interacted with everything. Now they wanted to sit there and listen. So I get what you're saying. The build up all the way up to the final match. You have to do that. It took one time of doing trying to throw up an event to get people to understand what we're trying to do. So I totally get what you're saying. So how long you been into business of professional wrestling?
I started my training in January 2005. So it's a total of 18 years. I spent a year and a half training OVW, and then that's where I ended up making the move down here and started with CWF. So that was in the fall of 2006. Other than I think I had a 3-year hiatus in the middle there shortly after I got married. It just kind of became tough keeping up with things and trying to focus on, being a dad and being a father. And so got an opportunity to come back where, Rob had reached out to me and said, hey, if your schedule allows, can you come back and do monthly shows and be at training once a month at least? And I said, we'll give it a shot. And I've kind of been back ever since. So gone through some tough things in life outside of CWF after that, during that time. But at the same time, it's where I needed to be because of the brotherhood that we have. Like, it's a tight knit group. We meet every week on Mondays for training and Bible study, and we build those relationships, that brotherhood. And so that I know, even if I'm not here regularly or whatever, I can reach out to those guys and we'll pray for each other and we'll walk each other through whatever it is. And so just like I've been there for other guys, they've been there for me. And so even though it's the hardest thing I've ever had to go through, with going through losing my family and stuff, it's brought me closer to God. It's brought me closer to these guys and back into where I really needed to be, which is part of CWF. So other than just a short little hiatus there where I didn't wrestle, I've pretty strictly been CWF. It's given me everything I wanted. Like, when I first joined with these guys in 2006, I got to go on a road show where we hit a couple of different towns and did 3 shows. And I, kids wanted my autograph, and so I got to travel. I got to sign autographs. I got cheered for. Like, I was like, wow, this is being a superstar, you know. And then at the same time, I didn't have to worry about, you know, a lot of the things that you hear about that is prevalent in a lot of locker rooms, but indie promotions all the way up to the big stuff. But that you know, the drugs and the alcohol and the sex and all the different temptations that come with that, that's not my scene, and that's not what I want. And so, like, I think it was just the best fit for me, and I don't really desire to do wrestling outside of that. I'm sure if I had different special opportunities where somebody specific reached out and said, hey, I want to work you on this show, would you mind coming out? Then I'd be open to it. But it's just not something, even though we've got a lot of different promotions in the DFW area, I could be wrestling, you know, multiple times every weekend. I could travel, but it's not really where my heart is. My heart is the fact that we do this for God, and we do this as a ministry.
Right. That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So, any advice to young male or young females coming into the business and making the commitment that it takes to be professional wrestler? I know it's kind of different with your promotion, but is there any advice you give new men and women coming into the profession of wrestling?
For sure. I mean, you know, yeah, what our product is different, but our training is the same. Now we don't have women currently involved, and I don't know if we will, but it's strictly a men's ministry. We do have women that help us with at our shows. You know, some of the wives or girlfriends or whatever that help with concessions or merch or you know, taking still photos, things like that. But as far as the core of our ministry, you know, yeah, we're an outward ministry for our shows and the audience we're in front of. We're also an inward ministry as men. And as I talked about before, that brotherhood. So, but our training is still the same. I remember after first coming here, I was asked several times, and still am once in a while, that, hey, how does your training at OVW compare to what we do here? And I'm like, y'all are doing the same stuff they did, you know? So we, again, as I mentioned before, like, we try to make everything that we do as top caliber, as best and as effective as it can be, just as if we were a real promotion. We don't want anybody to look at us and go, you know, what are these guys? They don't know what they're doing. So we take it very seriously that we're just as professional as the guys on TV. So to get back to the question, the advice I'd give is, you know, listen. I know that's a difficult thing. I think I've seen, I recently spent 3 years in education, and the kids these days, it's harder for them to truly listen, I think. They seem to, and not that that's any different than years past, but it does seem like it's become a bigger thing where the younger they are, the more they think they know, and the more they think they've got it all figured out. And of course, with YouTube and the internet, the things that they all grown up with practically since birth, you know, they can Google and YouTube anything, and so you can feel like a pro before you even step foot in the ring. And so I would just highly encourage listen, pay attention. We tell guys that if they have to be sidelined for whatever reason, like usually it's an injury, but if there's some reason that you can't physically get in the ring because you may hurt yourself worse, by all means don't, but still be here. Be in the fellowship, stand at the ring, watch and listen so that you don't, as much as possible, miss anything. Right. So I think that's really big key, is to listen, to be all in. That's you know, what I had to realize was, okay, I'm going to spend $500, and I've got to spend that money, even whether it's a day or whether I get 6 months out of it. And so had I, after one day, given up, then it is what it is. And it was one of those things, when I went into it, I just had to commit to, I'm not going to know if I can do this unless I try. And so I tried, and I kept going, and I, you know, like I said, I could hang with what we were doing. But as far as that upper level of getting noticed and things like that, the certain look that they're looking for and the time in the gym outside of that, I knew I wasn't doing, you know, and I knew I wasn't taking, you know, doing other stuff that maybe, you know, shortcuts and stuff to get there. And so that's part of where that struggle came in. And so it really depends on how far do you want to go with it, and what do you truly want to do. And then just continuing to commit to yourself to do whatever it takes. And like I said, just keep listening.
Awesome, man. That's good. I mean, I think that's probably relevant in anything you do, you know, caring for kids. Sure. I hear that all the time. My wife and I talk about that all the time. If you just pay attention and listen, really what you just did, we talked about it 20 minutes ago, but just listen and probably wouldn't have got to this point again. So, right. You know, tell a little 6-year-old, you know, don't ask to play video games. Mr. Scott will tell you when we can play video games. Well, 20 minutes later, he's asking to play video games, right? And you're like, no, if you would have listened to what I said, you probably would have been playing video games by now. But now we're gonna talk about this again. So I get the listening part. That's awesome,
For
man.
sure. And it's not a like, because that can come across, because it all depends on as you work your way up, and you start working in other locker rooms and stuff to try and get your name out there. You're gonna be working in front of different people, and so if you're not a good listener, that may come across to somebody, the right person, the wrong person, however you want to look at it, as being disrespectful. And
Right.
you don't want to get stuff shut down that just because the way you inadvertently came across, in your action. So.
Well, I was talking to somebody a while ago. I don't know if you remember this. About a year ago, there was this media scrum where CM Punk and the Elite got all met out of shape, blah, 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 blah. And we talk about guys in the locker room, the veterans like Sting, like William Regal, like Kenny Omega, and all those guys in the back that are telling these young bucks or these young people to just pay attention. Do you feel that the young up and coming wrestlers need to start paying attention to what you old people or the veterans are saying?
I think so. I mean, for the most part, what we run into, we typically get a good group of guys that come in and do training with us specifically anyway. And since I don't really venture out, then I'm not seeing it, everywhere else. But most of the time, the guys that we've got coming in are typically pretty good about that. Okay. And that's like, we're not super selective. Like, it's not necessarily closed off. If we know that you're, there's been some guys that we kind of found out, okay, by the way you're acting, we don't really think that you fit in with what we do, but we're still going to let you train and we're going to try and, minister to you and do what we can. But even those guys, like a little rough around the edges, or maybe don't quite believe what we believe, they're just here for some quality training and then move on. Then like they've for the most part been good about listening and paying attention and being respectful. So I think it's also probably just in how it's presented and how it comes across. But really it's the attitude of the other person. And so I mean, whoever it is going to find out real quick if they're being real, upfront and too assertive and like they know everything, then they're going to make enemies really quick and they won't get the opportunities that other guys get. So, we run a kids training, and we were just telling them last night, we're doing kind of this upcoming show is going to be where we're crowning new champions. And so it's real exciting for them. But at the same time, it's like we're instilling in them, it's not just who the best wrestler is. It is an all around effort, which is what you see in as adults being in professional wrestling as well. It's an all around effort. And so I think that's the other thing for them to grasp. Those who are in, early in their career and just training, put in the work and the effort to serve, to know that paying your dues is a part of it. And that doesn't necessarily mean getting pinned every night for a year and a half. That means setting up and tearing down the ring. That means helping set up the arena or tear down, clean up, putting in that work and effort. And I know one of the guys, he was helping us last night, and he wrestles other promotions in the area and he travels, but he told those kids too, he said, that speaks a lot more, that speaks volumes to those vets and to those promoters than anybody who's got the best ability. If you've got the best ability in the locker room and you're acting like a diva, you're acting like everything needs to be owed to you and given to you and entitled, like you're probably not going to get the same opportunities as somebody who clearly is busting their butt and serving and helping and doing whatever he can to help further that promotion in wrestling and helping put guys over and not seeing it as, I have to lose again, or I don't get the belt again. Like, take pride in the work you do, and the work we do is with each other to ultimately put on a show for the fans. So it's not about putting ourselves over. It's about giving them a good show.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you prefer singles or tag team?
Ooh, that's tough. Early on, and that's the way I know OVW kind of designed their training, because we got to do monthly shows. We had to sell our own tickets to the show kind of thing. And so it gives an opportunity to work in front of a crowd a little bit. But the way they designed it was, of course, the beginners were just in a battle royal, and then everybody else kind of in the intermediate work tag matches. So I think that's ideal for when you're first learning and first working matches. And I'm sure that's a model that comes from WWE and the other guys as well. But when you're first breaking in, you're working tag, that's just so much easier to kind of get your footing and make sure that you're not, because you tend to overthink about I'm gonna mess up, or I'm gonna do something wrong, or I'm gonna whatever. And so there's less of a spotlight when there's four of you sharing a ring, five really with the ref,
Right.
but four of you as compared to two. So don't get me wrong, tag team wrestling is great and I love it. So I'd probably lean more towards that, but singles has its place as well. And it's hard to be like in the position I'm in. It's hard to be the heavyweight champ if you're in a tag. So and strictly tagging. So it's got its pros and cons, but certainly looking back on, there was just so much, especially 80s and early 90s, with that when tag team wrestling was just had a really big pop and following. It was exciting to watch, and that's kind of a draw. And then, like I said, it's just a lot more comfortable and a lot more fun in a way, because you've got other guys to rely on, as opposed to, oh man, all eyes are on me and this other guy. So if I mess something up or something goes wrong, they're gonna know it was me.
Right. Well, you mentioned refs and stuff like that. So, in your opinion, is it important to have a solid ref in the ring with you guys working it, that knows what he's doing, and the people in the back, to make the match go as smoothly as possible?
For sure, absolutely. We try real well, and it's hard to kind of get that across, but that, especially with our ministry. But I think I'm sure there's plenty of promotions that encourage this way as well. But like it takes all of us to put this show on. From the guy running the sound to the announcer to the referees. And so certainly as far as the match goes, if you're looking at individual matches, yeah, the referees are very important. And I know we did one of our mission trips we did down in Mexico. We just barely over the border. And we had to be creative in how we booked the different shows, because we didn't actually have one of our full-time refs go with us. So we had to trade off a few of us being a referee for each show. And so the last show that we did, I ended up taking a turn being a ref. And of course I had to ref, I think we maybe did 3 or 4 matches, but just in those 3 or 4 matches, we're outside and in the sun. I was like, oh my gosh, I have so much more of a respect just for the physical aspect of being a referee. I had so much more respect from actually doing that job once, that I'm just like, wow, I'm never going to underestimate the importance of them again. But then too, like some of the stories we've been telling lately, and the things that we've been doing in some of our main events, we're involving a ref, even little things. And one of our, our head referee, head official, has been with us for a while now, but he's soaked it up like a sponge, and he is great at what he does. I can't say how he'd actually fare, in independent promotions. He'd probably fare really well. But man, he is on top of, whether it's helping us with time, or whether it's helping us with crowd, or whether it's some little aspect we need to involve him in, even if it's not, squashing him in the corner or something. If it's some little facial expression, like he was on it, and he's just helps even more add to the story that we're telling, and what we're doing for the crowd, for the fans.
That's awesome, man. So I had a few questions from my kiddos. Your favorite food. They want to know what your favorite food. What do wrestlers eat?
What do wrestlers eat? Well, unfortunately, this wrestler doesn't eat probably what wrestlers should eat. So always has been, always will be. My favorite food's pizza. Even though I worked and I've worked for Papa John's and Pizza Hut. A lot of times people say you work for those places, you get burnt out on it and you don't ever want to eat it again. I never went through that phase. I've been able to be creative about, making different, whether it's using different sauces or whatever, but just creating different combos where it doesn't get old to me. I still like pizza more than I should probably. But outside of that, I like a good steak. Steak's a good wrestler food.
Yeah. Well, after the podcast, my wife and I are going out front to make homemade pizzas out of tortilla shells. So I'm a pizza guy too. So I'm a pizza guy too. So that's all right. What's your Mount Rushmore of professional wrestlers, if you have one?
Oh, well, obviously, as I've said several times before, HBK and Jericho. I feel like I'd put Undertaker on there as well. I know he's a different style wrestler, with being tall and big and power and all that, but at the same time, the longevity that he had, and how he could work a crowd, and how he could put guys over, and just his love for professional wrestling, and just, he's all about it. He is all about being that guy that everybody looks up to, but then also passing on to the next generation, so that it doesn't have to forever be sustained on his shoulders. So I certainly have a lot of respect for him as a man and how he's carried himself throughout his career, but then also for, a lot of the creative matches he's had, even though he is kind of in a kind of a one type of a wrestler. He's kind of more the bigger and power guy that not everybody is and isn't as versatile, but he's been incredibly versatile. And the number of guys that he's worked and the number of matches that have just been, great. So I admire him a lot as well. Man, that fourth one, it's hard to not say Bret Hart or Ric Flair. I know I didn't watch a whole lot of WCW, and that was primarily where he spent a lot of time. Of course, NWA before that, I came in '93 being a fan, so I didn't get as much exposure to him, and he just didn't click with me as a fan anyway. But for sure, Flair and Macho Man and Sting and Stone Cold. I mean, it's hard to fill kind of that fourth spot.
Right.
But there's a lot of great guys that I think have just done not only well as professional wrestlers, but then also the legacy that they've created and left behind, even if they're not a part of it anymore. So,
those are some good ones. So, yeah. Who is your closest friend in the business of wrestling?
That's an interesting because my closest friends are the guys that I'm with in CWF, and since a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us primarily just work within our ministry and with each other. So that's really where my closest friends are. And they may end up being on, as you have guests on from us in the coming week. So Bill Bishop and my tag partner Guardian. But outside of that, and then Apocalypse, Adam Asher, he's running training next door right now. But I've really gotten a lot closer to him here lately as he's come back into our fold. But I haven't interacted with many guys that are have been workers outside. I know I've gotten chances to work with some guys who are kind of working in different areas of the country. Not necessarily under contract, but I haven't really gotten super close with any of them where they're necessarily, close friends. So when, I was only there for a year and a half at OVW, I didn't really make too tight of a bond with anybody that when I came back to Texas that stuck. So I haven't had any closeness with any of those guys, but for sure, like I said, we've got a real tight bond of guys here.
Awesome, man. What is the best advice you got from anybody in the wrestling, from all the way from Rob Vaughn to the guys that you just mentioned? What's probably the best advice that you got? I know you said that the best advice you would have is for just to listen.
Yeah.
What was the best advice that Mr. Ryan Hart got?
I'm going to go with, just because it's like nothing else really sticks out. So I'm going to go with what's most recent. As I mentioned, Apocalypse, Adam Asher's kind of been helping run our training lately. And that's kind of been, big role for him. And he started with CWF in 2000. So he's wrestled for 23 years. But unlike me, he spent time outside of CWF and he's wrestled all over. And so he's got a lot more matches, a lot more time, a lot more seasoning as far as being a veteran. I mean, for me to say I've been doing this 18 years is totally different when it's primarily just our ministry versus somebody who's done it for 18 years and they've done a lot of traveling. They've worked 3-4 shows every weekend, So he's the one that I've got a lot of advice from here lately. And so the big one that he's sharing with everybody, but I think I'm really trying to soak in more and more these days, is to slow down. Not that I've ever been a real fast or had a lot of speed that's not really my style, but even in just doing the basics well and doing whatever we do, the story that we're telling, we can tend to get in a hurry and we do stuff too fast. And so I think that's something that he's been learning more and more over the years that he's trying to pass on. And so I'm trying to be more aware of that as I'm, at this point in my career, but to really slow down and to take those moments to, like I said before, interact with the crowd more. And so if there's a moment where I can slow down in the ring and to interact, then that's going to gel all that together really well. So it's never, you never learn everything. And I think a lot of things in life are that way, but wrestling is for sure. There's still things I'm learning to this day. And I'm glad to have somebody like him over there helping us train. You know, I'm still taking bumps and training kind of thing, and you never stop learning. And so even though there may be a lot of things that I do or do well, there's plenty of areas I don't. I still struggle with, or that psychology wise, or just working the crowd, or being a veteran and being in charge in the ring and things like that. I still need to grow in and get better at, for sure.
Wow, that's good advice. I mean, not just wrestling. I mean, we need to all stop and slow down.
For sure. We fill our lives way too much, and it's too busy and too cluttered.
I think my first message I preached in in front of our church was Mary and Martha's story. Stop, slow down, and listen.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, and that I was preaching to the people, but that was working in my heart too, because you know you get so wrapped up in your world that you want to go ta 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 ta, and then you need to stop and say, whoa, because you're going to miss something important that might have been said or whatever. So that's great advice that guy gave you is, you know, just slow down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. What kind of match is your favorite match, man?
You know, I've gotten a great opportunity, and that's like the phrasing I use about being most accomplished. Like I don't want to say decorated, and I'm not going to try and say I've held the most belts. And it's even for us, it's not so much about the belts. It's more of a prop. Yeah, we use it to tell a story kind of thing, but it doesn't mean, and you know, it doesn't mean I'm the best wrestler. But so to me, when I say accomplished wrestler, like I've gotten to experience a lot of firsts for our ministry, and then just a lot of, you know, handful of different gimmick matches and stuff like that. And so those have their place when you're telling a story, as long as it's not, you know, less is more, and as long as you're building up to that. And so I've gotten to enjoy a lot of those, because that's one of those things. As I mentioned before, like I got to experience everything that I was looking for, getting to travel and getting to wrestle and getting to kind of have that notoriety or celebrity kind of feel, you know, getting your autographs and giving autographs and stuff. So like I've gotten what I thought I would get out of being a WWE superstar, and so I'm content with that. And then getting to use it for God is just incredible, and why I continue to do it and do it solely for CWF. But I lost where I was at, but to get to do different things, different gimmick matches like that, or different just outside the box or creative opportunities and telling stories, is like, that's one of those things that's kind of missing. Like that not that I dwell on, or that I think, man, I really wish I would have this, that, the other, whatever. Maybe I could have gotten signed and then I could do, but it's those little things that are like, okay, cool. That's something that I wouldn't have necessarily expected to get to do, that I'm content with working here,
Right.
that would be kind of out there. And so I've gotten to do a lot of different things like that have been, you know, kind of extra special. So the ladder match is fun. The lumberjack matches are fun too. But I can't narrow down just kind of favorite, but like I said, just getting to interact with the crowd and tell the story, like I just get really excited about, and I love getting to try to challenge myself to be better than I was before. I know anytime that I've flipped, whether I'm face or heel, like if I'm running as heel for a while, I'm like, and it's time to turn me face. It's like, okay, I want to see if I can be a bigger face, get more over than I was last time. And then when it's time to turn heel again, it's like, okay, I want to be better. I want to be, you know, get hated even more than I was last time. And so I think growth opportunities like that are what kind of keep me going. And to just get to go in there and have fun and tell that story physically in the ring, with guys that, you know, for the most part that we spend time together and we love and are involved in each other's lives, like that's just exciting. And it's hard to narrow down like a favorite type of match kind of thing, because just what we get to do is, I mean, I wouldn't have thought it was possible, you know, to get to do this, but then to get to do it for God, like for something that goes beyond, you know, fame and fortune here on earth. You know, doesn't really bother me. Yeah, that would have been cool. And that's what I dreamed of when I first started, you know, dreaming of being a pro wrestler. But now like the privilege and the honor to get to open people's eyes to a savior that loves them and that will impact them for eternity. Like, you can't get bigger than that.
Absolutely not, man. That's awesome. So have you been in a steel cage match yet?
Yes, I have. I've been in a couple. Those are interesting as well. typically the way we do it, we end up having a whole night of steel cage matches because it's just too time consuming to try and set up and tear down. And so a lot of times those get where they've got some added little, gimmicks or something to them. So it's not always just the same match every time. So that's good to change it up for the crowd a little bit. So, that's a different environment for sure. Like I remember watching those as a kid, as a fan and all, and you're just like, oh, that's so cool. And when you actually get to experience it, it's like, whoa. That's
I can't imagine that cage is forgiving at all.
No, it's not. And then like the one that we've been using, like it tightens in pretty close to the ropes. So when you're running the ropes, you're hitting that cage. So it is not forgiving at all.
When I watch, I follow an indie promotion here in the Panhandle of Florida, and then I watch a lot of other stuff and chair shots and steel cages and stuff like that. I get it. I get the outcome is scripted. I get all that stuff, but when I hear fans, say that this sports is fake, and I'm like, I get you, okay. And it was described to me by Danny Birch or Martin Stone today. He said, take two figure skaters out there in the middle of the ice. They're skating around. One is trusting another one to throw her up and catch her and spin them around and stuff like that. But there's always that unforgiving ice if you fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna hurt
for sure.
He goes, it's scripted, it's choreographed, and it's so beautiful. In the end, if everything goes right, we're successful. But if it doesn't go right, someone's gonna get hurt. So is that what your take on is when people say that what you do is fake?
Yeah, similar. It's for sure not fake. I mean, the hits are real, and there is a lot of training that goes on, of course, as we already touched on before. But it's not training to be fake. It's training to what I say when we're doing training, and something that I remember hearing when I went through training. But we're hitting hard, but we're hitting in what's called safe places. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It still hurts, right? And your body's got to get used to it. We were telling the kids, there's stuff that even at 10 years old, your mind is telling you this is not the way to do this, or this is not the way that your brain says I have to protect myself. We have to untrain that. You have to think differently, and it's going to hurt. And that's just a fact of the matter. So, but you're still hitting hard, but it's in safe places. That doesn't mean something can't go wrong. It doesn't mean somebody can't, like you said, still get injured. There's not parts of, the ring is built out of steel and wood. So, it's some of it's an adaptability. You're taking those hits and those shots or those, whatever it is, and your body builds up a little bit of getting used to it. That doesn't mean it still hurt. It doesn't hurt.
Right.
And then, if you're doing it right, and you're worth your salt, and you're truly a student of learning professional wrestling, perfecting your craft, then there's very little about it that you want to call fake.
Yeah.
It's still, as much as possible, it's hits, and it's hitting that ring hard, and it's doing stuff over and over and over again that tears down your body for sure. I can't I don't have the laundry list, thankfully, of injuries that a lot of other guys do, but just from the little bit of time comparatively I've spent wrestling, I can't sit in a car for a long road trip without the small of my back just killing me, because that compression of landing, giving a leg drop or whatever it is, landing on your butt, you're compressing your spine, and so that can't help but tear your body down. And so all those injuries and the things that those guys talk about, whether indies or all the way up to the big leagues, it's legit. It takes a toll on your body for sure. So there's nothing fake about that.
Do you have a plan B if something happens?
Not really. As I mentioned before, I've just always said I'm gonna keep wrestling till my body says I can't. And then I still want to be involved with the ministry. Like I said, every aspect of what we do is an important role. And so if there's somewhere else I can play a role, whether it's as a manager, whether it's as an announcer, commentator, whatever, I'm still interested in and willing and drawn to help and serve and be a part of what we do in this brotherhood. So if I'm not physically able to do what I do in the ring anymore, I'm going to find another avenue to keep serving and keep helping and keep doing what we do. So since it's not kind of my, what I'm pursuing outside of my 9 to 5 and beating my body up over, several times every weekend and traveling, then it's not something I'm putting everything into and hoping will pay the bills someday down the road. Then I don't have to worry about when that's gone that there's something I'm going to be missing kind of thing. Am I going to miss getting in the ring and doing some of that? Sure. Who doesn't, especially if you spend enough time doing it, but to still be connected and involved, and especially, like I said, with it being a ministry and we've got a greater purpose in what we do, I still want to be a part of that greater purpose any way I can. That's
awesome, man. How do you balance family and relationships with everything that you have going on at CWF?
I touched on that earlier, and that was difficult when I first got married, because I got married and was instantly dad as well, because she already had a child, and so she's my daughter, but I don't look at her any different. But that definitely had some challenges, and it was things I didn't think about or was prepared for. I thought I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and it was an adjustment to try and figure out. More than anything, I didn't realize how I would feel, and that okay, when somebody at home is sick or somebody at home didn't have a good day or whatever, that like I feel drawn towards, and my priority list is, God first and family, and then ministry or whatever else, work and stuff like that. And so if family's above everything else on that list and underneath God, then, it was like, okay, well, I feel like I need to be home tonight to kind of help out around the house or whatever. And so that's certainly was an adjustment during that time. And so, and it kind of got to a point where I couldn't do as much or travel as much. And like I said, ended up taking some time off, and I thought I was done, and was fine with that, was content with, what, I gave it my all. And I think I just need to focus on, this is the direction I'm at right now. If I can't balance the two well, where they're both feeling like they're getting the attention they need to continue on, then I won't. But and then, like I said, Rob called me back. I was still at that time married and had my daughter, and so I worked myself back in a little bit, and that worked, even though we were busier than we were before, and we were able to better find that balance, and to get adjusted to it. And so even though unfortunately I've gone through now, divorce and all that, it's easier now in a way, because I'm back to being single and having more time. So it's not as time constraining. But then, and it also depends on your work schedule too. And so if you're able to, it's always been to me about making this a priority. And so if I can, work everything else around that. There's going to be times where it doesn't, but because what we do is so unique, so special, and it's more than just what we do for the fans. Like I said, it's an inward ministry as well, and a connection that we all need, and that even men need. I was just telling a guy who came for the first time tonight to kind of check it out, but that, we get into where we tend to isolate, and as men, and especially when something traumatic happens or life changing. And so that's where we are prime and ready for the enemy to just tear us down even more. And so that is an important role in any man's life. And so even if that's not your thing, find your thing, but find a group of men that you can confide in and talk to and hang out with. I keep telling our guys that, find it just one guy. You don't have to, if you don't feel comfortable right now opening up to all of us here in this ring, find one that you really do connect with, and make a connection with them where you can talk regularly and pour out your life so that they can pour into you and be there for you. And so, that's very important. And so, as much as I can, I keep that a high priority and try to work everything else around it.
Awesome, man. Well, I asked you earlier if there's anything on message. I said, hey, how do I look you up? Blah, 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 blah. You said a lot of just on CWF and Facebook. So I found this funny thing on Facebook regarding you.
Okay.
I think it's you. It says, so Ryan Hart, rumor has it that you play your entrance music every time you walk into your house. Is that true?
That sounds like a Johnny Lawless line if I ever heard one. No, that is not true. But that there's times it's playing in my head, right? When I'm, depending on the situation or wherever I'm at, I may be hearing that music and just kind of get in that kind of mindset of stepping into Ryan Hart and if I need a little bit of confidence or arrogance in this way or that to deal with whatever situation is, that might be playing in my head. But no, I I do not play my entrance music when I come home.
What is your entrance music?
It is currently, I'm trying to think. You would ask that. It's called Hostage. I can't think of who it's by right now, but I had gone and looked up. It's been a website I go back to every so often, but it kind of has some more indie, heavier kind of rock and metal type Christian music, Christian artists that don't really get played on traditional radio. And so that's typically where I keep going back to, just kind of keep, make sure everything's kind of Christian, because most of what we do, I mean, we've ever since I've gotten started and involved in 2006, that's kind of been everything we do from start to finish needs to kind of reflect Christ, and so that goes down to the music as well. And so I've just stayed in a mindset of if I'm changing my music up, then I'm going to seek out something that fits, but that is Christian as well. So even as you mentioned before, when you're a youth pastor and you're introducing those students to, okay, here's what you're used to, because you're not typical church going kids, and then I'm going to work in stuff that sounds similar but they're actually Christian. Before you know it, they're listening to nothing but Christian. And so same kind of way, if you can you find a good song or band that like just represents what I'm walking out to, and they're Christian but they sound good and they sound like some of the mainstream what we call secular music, then I mean that's another connection point to the crowd. I think that's another key point for me, but to help me get in that mood and get in that mindset of going out there and being in front of that crowd. So
awesome, man. It's been a great time. It's an hour already went by, man. That's crazy. So I know you got Bible study at 9:00, but I have a couple more if you have time.
Sure.
First of all, I feel like this is the appropriate time. So can you share with us your testimony and how God is playing a part in your life and in your wrestling life? Does it all wrap together? So I guess the floor is yours. Can you share that? Do you feel like you can share that?
Absolutely. So my testimony, how I came to know Christ, I was 9 years old. And I can't tell you right now what, I don't actually remember what I actually heard in church from the pastor, but I heard something that piqued my interest where my mom talked to me afterwards. I asked questions back at home. And so she took me to she took me through in the Bible, the different verses that we call the Romans road to salvation, and explained to me, how that works of receiving Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And that night, before I fell asleep in the top bunk of my bunk bed, I prayed to receive Christ. So it hasn't been easy ever since, and I had a I don't want to say a rough start in the beginning, but I didn't really know what it was all about, and I wasn't really growing and maturing in the way that maybe I should have been or could have been. But later on, as I mentioned, my youth pastor before, he after I went to my first church camp as a youth, after my sophomore year, like then I was like, my eyes were just open to so much more, like worship through song and how the kids are raising their hands and the songs that just really touch your heart, and just you felt like you were literally praising God, like that. My eyes were really open to that, because always before on Sunday mornings it's mostly hymnals and stuff, and you just as a kid weren't connecting with that. And so to connect with that being a little different and just seeing everybody else, like this is the first time, and it's like I wanted more of it. And so like after that I found myself up there every chance I could. Every time we had something Sunday or Wednesday events, I was up there. And like I said, I felt kind of called to ministry, going on an event, I think as an adult sponsor. And I just kind of felt like God was telling me to be involved in youth ministry. I didn't know what that looked like. I'm still working on figuring that out, because I've kind of been away from that to an extent, and then I'm kind of coming back to filtering through, okay, what specifically should that look like right now. But even then I thought, even if it's just as Sunday school teacher, that's kind of my place. I felt like where God wanted me in the church was to help out with middle school and high school. So then I was an intern for about a year and a half under that youth pastor. And so things were pretty good up until kind of being out on my own. When I did make that move to Southern Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, I still, I found a church and was going regularly, but I found myself just kind of getting more and more distance, and I wasn't as involved. Didn't have a great church experience there when I was trying to get more involved. And so after moving back down here. And, we go through this, we all go through this, but there's kind of an ebb and flow, and there's times where you're closer and times where you're not. And so I definitely got further away as I started into my marriage, and I don't attribute that solely to everything that went wrong or that I did wrong in our marriage, but it certainly could have been in a lot better place had I been the leader I should have been, and the man of God I should have been, and make sure we were going to church and getting plugged into a church and things like that. So it took that to kind of bring me back to him. And so I've got a tattoo that's kind of a visual of the prodigal son, and that's the way I felt like. That I felt like I was so far away and I'd messed up so bad and sinned, and that, man, what right do I have coming back to God? But he runs to us. God, just like the prodigal, the father of the prodigal son, runs to us. He accepts us with open arms. He loves us. And so ever since then, I'm still struggling at times. It doesn't ever get any easier. You still struggle. You still have your ups and downs. You still have your times where you're a lot closer and you're further away. But through that point right then, when I was kind of at my lowest and surrounded by the guys from this ministry, and I got into counseling, and it's like God surrounded me with what I needed to get closer to him. And I was back in his word daily and going to church and putting him back where he needed to belong, which was, as I mentioned before, he should be first in our life. And so I finally put him back where he should have been. And so it's not that it's still without its struggles, but I've certainly come from a long way where I was, previously through a lot of that heartbreak and trauma that I'll admit I added on to, or I had a part to play in it for sure. How it plays into wrestling is, what we do with our ministry. That, like I said, that's what we're all about. So getting opportunities, I don't get as many opportunities being one of the top heels with our promotion. So we typically have faces do the speaking, whether it's testimony in the middle or sharing the gospel at the end. So I haven't lately had as many of those specific opportunities. But man, I love getting those opportunities. And then I love at the end when we get to counsel with people, when we get to talk to those kids afterwards, they raise their hand. Okay, what did you raise your hand for? And just kind of get some feedback. What did they hear? What stood out to them? And just kind of talk them through whatever it is, kind of thing. Maybe they just want some prayer. Maybe they're ready to accept Jesus Christ right there. And so my testimony and what I go through with God and my relationship with him plays directly into what I do as wrestling, because even when I don't get to share it from the ring, I'm still getting opportunities to where we are a representation, we're ambassadors for Christ in how we present ourselves and how we interact with people, and just being there for them and being genuine. So
that's awesome, man. So any words for fans out there or wrestlers out there that you could to close that you would just like to share on what's on your heart?
Like I said, this is such a unique ministry, and our founder, Jesus Freak Rob Vaughn, will be the first to say. I've heard him say it many times, but there's no reason this should have worked. Like it doesn't make any sense. And we've been going for 23 years, and it's like there's still people that don't know about us, even in our own backyard in the Rockwall area, that they're like, what, and we don't know how that happens. But at the same time, it's also creating new audience members almost every time. I think if we had everybody that's ever been to a show consistently in our building every time we had a show, this building wouldn't be big enough. We'd probably be doing it in high school auditoriums, gyms or something, something bigger venues. So it truly is God at work. God is used this, not that it shouldn't have worked, but one of the passage or the verses that we're kind of founded on is 1 Corinthians 9, 22. Paul says, to the weak, I became weak that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men so that I may by all means save some. And as I said, it's unique because it should meet people where they're at, as opposed to they may not show up at a church. And even though we're not typically in front of wrestling fans like you'd think we would be, we're still seeing people give their lives to Christ. We're still seeing people impacted, and we're still seeing his work being done through us. And it's certainly not from anything that we're doing, because clearly if we were doing this right, everybody would know who we are, I think. If we knew how to, whether it's a promotion issue or whether it's, I don't know all the different parts that play into that could make us more more famous even in our own area. But at the same time, that's not what we're after. And so it really is about what God is doing in and through our ministry.
Absolutely. That's a very good point, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so happy with the connection that we've made with me and you and Robin, CWF, and I just felt like what an opportunity it could be for you guys to share your stories. And whoever listens to this after it's over, if they go through the Facebook or they go to YouTube, wherever they watch it, something I'd love to see is them. Maybe they're the lost person that needed to hear this, needed to hear your story, you know. So I'm glad that the opportunity is here for the platform is here for you guys to share your stories. I think it's really crucial for us, the world, because we're not in a great place, if I could say so, I guess.
Definitely, yeah. And we appreciate you. I mean, like I said, that's a little thing, right? To have seen the shirt that Chad was wearing, and then to just kind of and God using your wife kind of thing to be patient and waiting for Rob's text back kind of thing. That, like, we're really appreciative of, one, you listening and being sensitive to the Holy Spirit in that way, but then two, because you're wanting to help us out, right?
Right.
You're wanting to get us more exposure, and not that it's again for our sake, but it's because don't know how people still haven't heard of us, and so for us, but for Jesus' sake, right?
Yes, because I tell you, I'm not gonna lie. I could tell you now. I can say this off air, but I want to say this on air because it needs to be said. At first, I was like, man, my fan base, are they going to accept this as a Christian Wrestling Federation? Well, my heart said they need to hear it. Who cares?
Yeah, for sure.
We need to get this out there. More people need to know about CWF. More people need to know that there are wrestlers out there that have a story, that have went through hell and have came out victorious, and you know what I'm saying. So and I was like, you know what, the heck with the people that are following, because they're going to be there or they're not. They're gonna come or they're not,
right?
You know, and they're going to hear it or they're not. And I just want to have that opportunity for Jesus. It's not about me. It's not about this podcast. I mean, I can take Huge Pop podcast off the screen, and it'd be for what Jesus wants for the creation. He wants everybody to make it to heaven. If we can get the word out and cause that's just so awesome.
Right, for sure. And then you're helping us to further the kingdom as well. So
yeah. So I mean, like you said, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about what Jesus is doing through our lives. And yeah. So so I'm gonna just give you the closing. Thank you, Ryan, for coming on the show. Is there anything you need to say before we sign off, and then I'll just meet you in the lobby? Is there anything you need to say?
I don't believe so. I mean, I did bring with me, because I saw that Huge Pop Wrestling, your podcast is based on these guys here. These are the only two I actually own. They were gifts.
That's sick, man.
One's The Undertaker and one's Ryan from The Office, favorite TV show. So they were gifts from a family friend of mine who, I mean, she's a huge Pop fan. I don't know how many she's got, but she's got a huge collection of them. She buys them as gifts for friends. And then I've got as a little award that was made from one of our sister ministries, CWF West Texas. They give out little Slammy awards, and they last year, I believe, or the year before, they gave a little Ryan Hart that they painted up. And so I've got a Ryan Hart.
That is sick. I need that, man. That's awesome.
So I did want to be sure and share that with you. Give you some props there for your unique podcast. I know I didn't get to watch many, and I haven't been following long until I just met you. But I think it's cool what you're doing. And I can't thank you enough for having me on and hearing my story, and then hearing the story of the CWF. I'm looking forward to the opportunity we're going to have for more guys to get to be a part of it as well.
Absolutely.
And then for sure, if we can, in part of getting the word out, I don't have it all memorized. I should have had it all written down. I just wasn't quite as prepared, but we're ChristianWrestling.com. That's our website. We've got a Facebook where we run majority of our social media stuff through. So all of our YouTube videos are put on there. We are currently running 2 shows a month that are here in Fate, which is in the Rockwall, Texas area in DFW. We've got one that's we're calling Uprising, which is kind of more where we're kind of trying guys out, not necessarily that they haven't earned a spot, but they're just not full-time with us. They wrestle other areas, and so we bring them in for an opportunity. And then what we call CWF Eternal, which is the one where our main group of guys that wrestles on, and our longest running kind of storyline show runs out here in Fate. But those are all turn right around within the next 48 hours typically, and put out there on YouTube. I want to say it's CWF Rockwall, but I think we got a couple different ones, so I'm not 100% for sure. But there's going to be those links on Facebook as well that take you back to our YouTube, and just follow us and subscribe and keep up with us. And even if you can't make it to Texas, you can still be a part, and whether it's through donations or through prayer. I mean, pray for us. We've been on a few mission trips before. We were set to go on one to Costa Rica this summer, but it just didn't happen. So we're hoping that'll still work out in the next year or two, maybe. And then of course just the traveling that we do. If you're a church, whether you're involved in church or not, or you're just a church member, we do school assemblies. I mean, there's so many different areas that we can help out in, and introducing Christ to people. And so you want to bring us in, and get in contact with Rob Vaughn, and he'll give you all the details, and we'll see if we can't work together to help introduce you and your whoever's in your community, in your area, but introduce them to Christ through pro wrestling.
Awesome, man. Thank you, Huge Pop Wrestling fans. Thank you, Rob Vaughn. Thank you, CWF, for coming on. I'm gonna play my exit songs music, and if you just hold up and don't jump off the thing, I'll talk to you in a second, okay? Extreme.